So the next page we're going to create is a reports page, which will be useful for staff, for example, to they can do things like see a list of products that are currently existing in the database, or perhaps they can see a list of users or orders or something like that. The benefit is once we've sort of built the framework for this page, we can tinker with what reports we want to actually run. We're also going to use a little JavaScript method called window.print, and all that does is creates a button. So we'll be copying and pasting this line of code here from W3 Schools, and all that does, as I said, is creates a button that you hit, and then it brings up the print dialog from Windows, which is really handy for printing reports and stuff like that. But we'll get back to that in a minute. So let's create our reports.php file. And what we're going to do is go back across to our CRUD page and take a few things from it to save time. Again, this is just probably a page that you only want staff to access. What's going on with our formatting? We need some PHP delimiters. Whoops. So we can use this if statement here that we've got to block access to non-staff users. We don't need any of this stuff. We do need our HTML framework though, and we will actually take the PHP that's in the HTML there for outputting the products table initially. We'll clean that up in a moment. I'm also here, before I do anything else, I'm just going to add a link here for logging out, or that links to logout.php, which is essentially a logout button. So we'll add a link to logout.php. We'll say logout and close that off, and we will test our reports page, shall we? You can see there we've got our logout button. Oh, it's access denied. What's going on? Access denied. Interesting. Anyway, we'll have a look at what that's doing. That's why I haven't included the session or continued the session. That's why that's happening, as you probably already know, hopefully. So session start obviously continues the session. If I don't continue the session, it doesn't know I'm still logged in when I go to another page. So we'll go to reports now, and it should not boot us out. There we go. We've got our logout button, and we just need to clean up our HTML. So we don't need a form there. Don't need that message there. We do need a table here, which I will adjust now. So as I said, we'll start with the products table. Don't need an action column. We don't need a form within our table or each row. No, we don't. Which means we don't need a hidden input or a button. In fact, we don't need all of that. So let's test that and see what that comes up with. And that looks pretty good. So that's our products table. We will also put in that print button now. So test that and make sure that works. So we'll just chuck it here. Print this page, and yeah, it's really handy if they, for example, want to print a report that they're looking at. You can see there, it comes up with print this page, handy. We'll update this heading in a little bit, I think. We'll just leave it blank for now. So that's outputting our products table content. Obviously, we want to be able to perhaps select different tables from the database that we want to output and to the page, and then perhaps print if we like. So we're going to need to do a few things to do that. So it'd be really handy to have a way of changing what table they want to look at. So I did say before we don't need a form. In fact, we do. So I apologise for that. But so I'll put a form here with a drop-down list, shall we? So we'll go select. We'll call it selection. And our options are, we'll go say product is an obvious one. Call that products. We might go orders, because it'd be handy for staff to be able to look up orders, obviously. I'm sure you can imagine why. Staff might also want to look up users and their account details. Possibly that will include their hashed password. I'm not sure about the privacy or security sort of considerations there, but we'll worry about that a little later. So let's just test that that's in fact there. There it is there. And what we'll do is, rather than having a submit button, for cases like this, it's actually way probably better in terms of user experience to have a form submit that triggers when we change the drop-down list. So you can do that by doing this, a little bit of JavaScript. So you can see JavaScript's pretty handy for things like this. Let's just test that actually submits. If I change that, you can see there in our URL, it is doing that. Awesome. So that means this name selection here determines what table we're selecting from in our code below, in our SQL statement. For example, if we changed our drop-down list to users, this products down here will become users, which means we need to actually create a variable to make that a bit more dynamic. So at the top in our PHP, we'll go if is set, as in has the what is the form? A selection being set. If it has, then we'll create a variable called selection, and we'll set that to equal to this, or what they've selected from the drop-down list. So now we can use that variable instead of the hard-coded table name. And obviously now there's an issue where these field names are going to be wrong, because the field names in the products table don't match up with the field names in the users or orders table, obviously. And you can see I've also hard-coded the table headings, so that's an issue. But there is a way around it. I'm going to show you a SQL query that actually gets you the table headings or the field headings, and it is select. I don't use this one much, so I have to actually copy it down from my notes. Select column name from information underscore schema dot columns, where table schema is equal to Northwind. So that's my database name. and table name is equal to whatever is selected on our drop-down list, but let's just test one. Let's go orders. We'll copy and paste that a bit later. And you can see there it returns our column names, which is really handy because it means we don't have to hard code our column names here. We can in fact do it with a bit of SQL and PHP, so we need some delimiters the right way around. Would be good. Let's delete them. So I've got a table row, then a table row closes. So in here we'll chuck in our SQL query. So that is going to be equal to the drop-down list selection, which is good. And we'll call this SQL headers or something. No, we'll say SQL columns. It's a bit more descriptive. And that will get us, or it will select our column names. We need to execute that query as we do usually, and that's against the connection in the query where the query we are executing is SQL columns. Okay, so now we need to loop through those results as we do normally. So we'll go while row is equal to MySQLi fetch array to loop through, and that is based on the result object we're going to loop through. We want to echo our table headings. So we'll go echo th, which is table heading. We'll go $row and it's 0, which is th, which is our heading. So let's head across and test it. You can see there we've got errors, undefined variable selection, because when the page loads, selection is not yet created until we change the form, and we're trying to use it when the page loads, so that's a bit of an issue. The other error is because we're trying to use field names that are for tables that don't relate to those field names there, such as product ID, which we'll fix a little later. So let's try and fix this first one. Essentially, this if statement needs to be deleted from there. And it needs to be down here, I believe. So set, because we only want to execute this stuff when the form is submitted. So that is going to be fun, fixing all this indentation. It's still being used here, so that needs to be part of this if statement as well, which means it's even more fun, fixing all the indents. Everything else has to go across. So that lines up with that there and there. So that lines up with our top if statement. That looks a bit better. See if that fixes them. Cool. Still getting the error. That's because I haven't set the variable equal to this. Just testing you. Try that one again. And we'll set it to something, and we get our headings for our columns or fields for users and orders. Not for products. Now that is because when the page loads, it's defaulting onto products, which means we can't select products again and trigger the form submit. So what we can do to fix that is add another option, I hope. We'll set this one to a disabled option that just tells the user what to do. Such as select table. See if that fixes that issue. So select table, select product, and we get our products headings, we get our orders headings and our users headings. Cool. So our next little task is to actually get the data into these tables depending on what we're wanting to look at and perhaps print. The issue is, at the moment, the data that actually appears in the table is hard-coded and it's based on the products table. So we want to do something differently to that. We want to use a different method. And the method that we're going to use is we're going to count the number of columns for the table selected and then use that to output row, $ row, and then all those columns in sequential order. For example, instead of product ID, if this was the products table, you can actually do row and then a numeric index instead of a word index, which is really handy for situations like this. So we need to count the number of columns. So let's do that here, column count, and that is going to be equal to -li number of rows result. And we'll just echo that and make sure it matches up or does what we think it's going to. 6 for the users table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 for the orders table looks right. So we've counted our number of columns, so that works, which is good. That means we can use a loop down here rather than hard coding. So let's think about how we might do that. So we know the number of loops we need to achieve. It's based on our column count. So we'll just may as well use a for loop. You can probably do it with both. But when I did this previously, do it with a for loop. All right. I'm going to echo that HTML now instead of closing our PHP delimiters, just because I don't know, seems more logical. So in here we're for. What's going on? There we go. I don't know where my curly brace went, but anyway. There we go. All right, so for I equals 0, initialize a loop counter. And while that loop counter is, say, less than column count, we'll increment it each iteration. And what are we doing in each loop? So we've got a row, each while loop. And within each loop of the while loop, we want to execute this for loop for the number of columns. So we'll go echo td plus row at position I, which will give us the data we want to put in the td, and then we'll close the td and test it. Hopefully if I've explained that well enough. It's a little tricky to explain things while writing code. But send me an email if you want me to explain it again, or rewatch this part of the video. Okay, so our page loads, there's nothing selected. Select products, and we're still getting an error on line 87. Let's have a look at what's going on here. It's an interesting issue because I wasn't getting that when I tested this previously. I didn't have quotes there previously. Maybe that's the issue. Yep, that's a funny one because I have said previously you need quotes on varchars or text types, which is what selection should be if it's based on that value. Anyway, that's weird. Okay, so products works. Orders looks like it works. That is the content of the orders table. And users works as well if you want to use users. So that concludes how to do a reports page with outputting the content of a few different tables. And obviously we can hit print, and brings up the Windows print dialog for your particular computer. I'm just going to put some more space around that button because it looks a little horrible. Well, I mean, the whole website doesn't look great because I haven't done any styling yet. We've got no nav bar and stuff like that, but we will get to it. See you in the next one.